Since the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on the 10th of December 1948. It is also 24 years since the South African Constitution was signed into law by former President Nelson Mandela. To help me reflect on this is the Chairperson of the South African Human Rights Commission, Advocate Bongani Majola. Advocate, good evening and thank you very much for your time tonight on the news feed late night. With over 2 decades that have gone and the work that the South African Human Rights Commission is doing to try and build a cohesive society in the year of the pandemic, how well have we done?
Well, generally we have done well as a country in terms of human rights. And this is evident from the way in which we are received in many parts of the world. The global networks, for example, of human rights institutions have great respect for the South African Human Rights Commission, and we get invited in many instances to speak, to do things. We get consulted, and people do come here. The network of African national human rights institutions is actually here at this commission as we speak. They arrived here about 2 days ago, exactly because of the examples that they say they see in South Africa in terms of the promotion and protection of human rights. So compared to many other countries, this country has done quite well with regard to the promotion and protection of human rights. Having said that, I must say that there is still a very long way to go that we still need to cover in terms of creating what the Constitution refers to as a culture of human rights in the country, and to create social cohesion and to extricate people from poverty, unemployment, and the like.
Yeah, I mean, the single largest issue, right, if we just were to zoom in and come closer to home in 2020, was how human rights were infringed upon during a time of a pandemic, when we saw lockdowns that by and large shut down the economy. So people, as you mentioned, were largely challenged economically and therefore, for example, couldn't get access to food. So then we're talking food parcels and how food parcels were distributed to people. Then we're talking freedom of movement when a curfew was implemented and the South African National Defence Force was on the ground. Lives were lost, people were abused. You talk then also about the directives that were issued by the various ministers as the lockdowns proceeded. When you chart all that down, how did we do this year?
Well, we did not very well this year in terms of the observance and respect for human rights. Granted, we were faced with an unprecedented situation, and the government was thrust into a situation that was unfamiliar to it. But what became very clear is that the pandemic actually just threw a spotlight on the violations or the shortcomings that already existed. Water shortages, lack of housing, lack of access to education, lack of access to healthcare, for example, all those were just very vividly shown. And yes, we then saw the use of security power, that there are still no inhibitions as far as the use of the power to arrest, the use of force and so on. We have done very badly in that regard. We are not the only one. We have Nigeria, we've seen Nigeria and so on, but that is not an excuse for us in South Africa to have a security force that uses excessive force and violates people's rights with impunity. I must say that we, as the Commission, were quite disappointed with the police because the numbers of cases of deaths in detention, of police brutality have not gone down. They have actually, in fact, increased. There is a time when in one of the areas, Heidelberg, in the Western Cape, we found that 4 people lost their lives in the hands of, or in detention, within a short period of time, about 2 to 3 months. So in some instances, we haven't done well. But we shouldn't blame only the security agencies, because with gender violence, we've also shown that even we ourselves at our homes, we're just as brutal. And so we need to do something in order to actually change this culture that, you know, whenever there is a challenge, we use force, legal force and other force to deal with problems.
Yeah. The Commission is faced, one would say, with a massive challenge at this time, politically maybe, but even socially. That challenge that is facing the country, which puts a little bit of a blemish, maybe not even a little bit of a blemish, but a huge blemish on the work that we have done so far in South Africa. And I'm talking here, for example, Colini, I'm talking here, for example, Brackenfell, I'm talking here other instances that we have seen, the penny sparrow issue. I know at some point the Commission also had to deal with Angelo Agrizi's statements that were coming out of the Commission and things that they were saying during a dinner once in one of the visits, and he had to even admit and pay a fine. And that whole issue of racism, we've got the Clicks saga to talk about also this year. Is the Commission able to navigate this political as well as social challenge effectively?
Well, we are able to navigate this, and we're dealing with it, but it's not a simple matter. It is quite complex. With regard to racism and especially with regard to hate speech, you have seen that even the judges themselves are not agreed on the right way in which we should deal with this matter. You find that in Kumalo, they decide one way. In Kolane, they decide the other way. In Masugu, they decide the other way. We're actually just hoping and praying that the Constitutional Court actually comes out with a directive. But once that directive is there, I'm sure we're going to make a lot of headway in that regard. It is quite a blemish on South Africa that we've got the Colinis, the Brackenfells, and so on. But I think that it is better because we are able to deal with them. There are countries in which we have not been, people are not able to deal with all these violations of human rights. We appeared before the African Commission last month, and 4 countries were actually highlighted where things are terrible. I'm not saying that we should be compared with those countries. I'm just saying that we are not as bad, but yes, we still need to do a lot because human rights in this country are still also not where they are supposed to be 25 years after the establishment of the Commission. What I think we need to also pay attention to, and that nobody else is paying attention to, is the fact that, you know, law and order has actually collapsed and broken down because people do whatever they want. If they want to ban a clinic, they ban the clinic, nothing happens. They ban a police car, they break into a shop, they drive through a red robot and so on. There is just very limited accountability. And if you've got money and you can pay your way out, you pay your way out and nothing happens. And I think that it is very wrong. We as the society, not just the Commission, have to make sure that when we make laws, we ensure that those laws are obeyed. We don't have to force people, but I think education also, but in addition to that, there has to be accountability when people break the law.
Chairperson of the South African Human Rights Commission, Advocate Bongani Majola, appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us tonight on the News Feed Late Night. A reflection there on the work being done by the Commission to build a cohesive society.